Listen for God's word. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Again on this Earth Day, I love these two parables of Jesus where he uses the natural world to speak of our relationship with God the Father. The opening hymn we sang today, All Creatures of Our God and King. I don't know how many of you can still remember this, and unfortunately none of the young folks are here today. But years ago, when we did our own camp out on Langless Mountain with the kids that are now in college and older, who were in middle school at the time, we used that hymn as the theme of our week. And the kids actually learned to love that hymn and really got that every bit of that hymn talks about each part of creation and how each part of creation glorifies, praises, and shows God in the world. So it was wonderful to sing that hymn again today and remember that time, and to read these texts where Jesus talks about the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom and how they are wonderful examples of the relationship that God calls us into and how they reveal the heart of the divine. We've talked before about the shepherd, so today we're going to take a look at the vine and the image of the vine. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but the Old Testament used the image of the vine to speak of the people of Israel, the people of God. And that image was literally emblazoned over the front doors of the temple, the great temple. There was grapevine across that. Just like at the hospital or at the Sprague Theater, if you walk in their lobbies, what do you see above? A tree that shows the people that have given money to support that particular endeavor. Same thing at the hospital, and many other places today will use a tree. The Jewish symbol of the nation was a grapevine, and that vine that was over the door of the temple, people would save money for years to buy gilding to gild even just one grape or a part of that vine. The scriptures talk about the vine, the grapevine of God's people. And it was the emblem on the coin of the Maccabees during that period that the Maccabees actually ruled their own people. The coinage included that image of the vine. So it had become the very symbol of Israel. But interestingly enough, the symbol of the vine, when it is used in the Old Testament, is often and almost always talking about the degeneration of the people of God, not of their health. So it's a degenerate vine. It does not do what it's supposed to. It won't give its fruit when it's supposed to. And it won't give the fruit to the one who owns it. These are the kinds of things that are repeated in the Old Testament about this vine. So Jesus says, he's talking, of course, to a Jewish audience. And he says, I am the true vine. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish and you think you're part of the vine of Israel, because that's a degenerate vine. It's me who is the true vine, and I am the true vine because I abide in my Father. I live in my Father, and I live to bear fruit for my Father. He is the genuine article. Okay? So, the vine in Palestine, of course, was a huge part of their economy and of their agriculture, of what they ate and drank. It remains so today because we have had increasing wineries in our area. We're beginning to know more and more here about cultivating grapes for wine. It's not an easy plant to grow. I think it's very interesting. I would love to hear, I have a colleague in this presbytery. She is pastor of a large church. She is originally Australian, and her husband, an American, is a vintner. And they met when he went to Australia to learn more about his task. But they live here now, and he works for an Oregon winery. I would love to hear her sermon on this text, because she would know so much more than I do about it. But I can tell you that grapevines need a great deal of attention if the fruit is to be good and usable and result in an excellent product. It's usually grown, as most of you know by now, on trellises. And the ground has to be kept perfectly clean underneath it. It will not tolerate weeds to grow on the ground, even though the grapevine's roots are within the dirt. It's often allowed to creep out on sides, sort of like being espalier, but not against a wall. And it takes a lot of preparation of the soil. It grows when it's being well treated as far as where and how it's being cared for. It grows luxuriously. It will grow tremendously long branches and can continue to just keep going and going, and will put all its energy into growing instead of bearing, if you let it. Okay? It will put all the energy into leaves. It has to be pruned for that not to happen. I also found out, and I did not notice, that some branches will never bear. And those branches, of course, have to be taken out. A young vine is not allowed to fruit for at least 3 years. It needs that time to develop to maturity. And pruning is the heart. Wise pruning by a one who knows how to prune and what to prune is a critical issue. So let's look at 2 ways that this vine metaphor speaks to us. First of all, the thing about the vine that I love is that it's an organic unity of different components that are mutually interdependent. The entire vine as a whole, and I like the illustration on the front of your bulletin because it gives that whole idea. All the parts of it are mutually independent. Nothing can survive without the other parts. First of all, and this of course is not a part of the vine itself, but the vine dresser, the farmer, is the owner and the cultivator. And that cultivator is responsible for the life of the vine in the first place. It is he or she who plants it, and it is he or she who determines its growth, its sustenance, and its production. Then you have the vine, which is the heart of the operation. It is what gives the whole plant its reason and its ability to produce. The vine is the essential part. Some of you know that vines have been carried from one country to another, from one side of the world to the other, because the vine is the heart, and it can be grafted upon, it can be adapted to a new place, but they're treated, those good vines that produce well and produce grapes of excellence are treated like gold by the people in the industry. And then you have the branches. So if you consider that the people of Israel are the natural branches, and that those Gentiles called and grafted into the vine, you have 2 kinds there of branches, and they work together and produce together. This is not a vine, a grapevine, but did you know that there are apple trees that you can buy that will produce 14 different kinds of apples on one tree because of grafting? But you know what I think is really interesting about that? The longer the graft remains, and the more time the apples grow on the same tree, the more they will become like its originator. Does that say something? The branches are the arteries of the organism. They soak up the sustenance that's provided by the vine, and they transform that life into new life, giving through the fruit. The fruit, of course, gives pleasure and sustenance to others. And the fruit, Jesus says, and the scriptures say over and over again, is the proof of the vitality and the integrity of the entire plant. So there's this inescapable relationship of the components. John uses the verb to abide, to remain. There's a constancy of presence here, of faithfulness, not just to live in a place, but to dwell within it, to stay in a constant and continuous relationship as a whole, indwelling one another. And interestingly enough, that verb, abide, appears in this text that I read this morning, those first 11 verses. That particular verb appears 10 times. That's the heart of what John's trying to say. It's all about abiding together, being a part of the whole, which at its heart is the vine of Jesus. Gail O'Day is a contemporary New Testament scholar. She says the life envisioned in this metaphor stands in striking contrast to contemporary Western models of individualism, privatism, and success based on individual accomplishment. This metaphor assumes social interrelationship and accountability. No Lone Rangers. Must be a part of the whole. In the vine metaphor, an individual is fruitful only as he or she abides, not just with Jesus, but with others in Jesus' love. The mutuality envisioned by the vine metaphor is a sign of the presence and the work of God. As my Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. So we're in reality, in God's world, we are as dependent as these metaphorical branches are on both the vine and the farmer, the vine dresser. Interestingly, though, unlike this metaphor, in our case, fruitfulness requires that we acknowledge our dependency and allow the pruning required to make us fruitful. That we intentionally stay in that relationship. Branches don't have much of a chance to make a decision. They either stay or they get cut off without any choice of their own. Ours is a choice to remain in constant contact and to fulfill our fruit-bearing purposes. The unity in this vine does not exist apart from the disciples' participation. Now, the second thing that we can really learn from this vine has to do with that pruning. Any branch on a grapevine that is not pruned will gradually bear less and smaller fruit until finally it becomes completely useless. You must prune fruit. There's a play on words here in the Greek. The word that is translated as prunes or cuts away is eri, and essentially is how it's pronounced. And kaphtheri means to cut back. If you lop it off entirely, it's one. When you add kaf, it makes it that it's pruned back. The interesting thing is that same Greek word is also translated as cleanses. And it actually, in the reading in the text that I read, it's the very same word for pruning that was translated as cleanses. The ancients spoke of pruning as a cleansing of a plant, the cleansing of branches. It is God's revelation of God's self through what Jesus had taught. He says, you've already been cleansed because you've lived with me, you've heard me, you've seen me. You have had a cleansing of your branches. To the disciples he was immediately talking to. And when we live in, abiding in Christ, we continue to have that same kind of cleansing. It has a cathartic effect. This is the word that catharsis comes from. It means to cut back. To have that within us that does not belong. that is not fruitful, that is not helpful, to be cut back, to be scrubbed away, so that we can be more productive. Pruning sometimes feels more catastrophic than cathartic. I think we've all had some experiences of that pruning. Do you know what the rule of thumb is for fruit farmers in general and for vine growers as far as how much to prune? Some of you are gardeners. The rule of thumb is prune as much as you think you should, and then prune that much again. Because you really have to do a lot more than what you want to, what you think maybe you should. Being cut down to size isn't very comfortable. It's not always a very pleasant experience. But Jesus says very clearly it's necessary. It's essential for a branch to grow strong and to grow bountiful. Otherwise, the branch will fritter away its life in growing wood, but no fruit. When a branch puts all its effort into itself, rather than into fruit bearing, the vine dresser lops it off entirely, because it's not good for anything. You know, Jesus says it's lopped off and it's put on the trash pile. The wood of grapevines is worthless. It's not even good for making a fire. You can burn it, but it burns so fast and so quickly with so little heat that it's not even good for cooking. Using a fire for cooking, it's just absolutely worthless. It's a lot like briar beans when it comes to what you can do with them. Dead, not a thing. Worthless. Again, Gail O'Day made an important observation. She says the task of assessing fruitfulness, and this is absolutely critical. Who is it that has the mind and the eye to know how much to prune? The vine dresser. Not the branches. None of the branches tell the farmer how much to cut and which guys he ought to cut. God alone is the one who determines what needs to be pruned and where and how much. There are no bishop or elder or church bureaucrat or clergy branches. There's no I'm more religious than you branches, which makes it a really powerful image of what the church is meant to be. A center vine out of which all the branches grow. That center vine is identifiable. There's no question which part is a vine. And you notice there are no grapes that grow on the vine itself either. But there's no hierarchy among the branches. And the only one who can tell which ones are useful and which ones are not is the vine dresser. Interestingly enough, God's amazing and wonderful good news in this metaphor is that in God's vineyard, trust is a two-way street. We're called to trust God to prune us appropriately. But we are absolutely essential to the operation as well. Again, the vine does not produce fruit, not on its trunk, not at its heart. It is on the branches that fruit appears. Fruit bearing is an honor. It's our God-given privilege. But if we don't function as we're called, if we don't make God's identity plain in the world by fruit that bears God's image, we'll lose our place in the vine entirely. We have the comfort of knowing that God's part of the bargain is to give us everything that's needed for success. There's no better vine dresser than God. There's no gardener who knows the garden better and what it needs to be fruitful. And God always keeps his part of the bargain. So if we stay, abide with him, we can be sure that despite some judicious trimming here and there, we will begin to bear fruit. So let's get growing. Amen. Our affirmation of faith is found in